Today on Awaken Activate, we're going to talk about lost civilizations. Is it history or myth? Lemuria and Atlantis. Let's get into it. Let us first look into where did these civilizations come from. There was a planet that was between Mars and Jupiter called Maldek. This was their home planet. They're a more evolved, advanced being. They operated in the 5th or 7th realm of density. They would toggle back and forth from spirit or ether into physical at the speed of thought and at will. Over time, they were able to implement robotics to handle the menial tasks in life. They also were able to control the weather, so they no longer had to worry of famine. Another project that they were into was rudimentary space flight. And with all of these things being taken care of, they spent more time in the sun, laying around and doing not so much. And with anything, when you sit around too much, problems do ensue. They did discuss philosophy and looked into a lot of the science of things. But in due time, what happens is the disease comes in. The infection comes in, the virus, where it is an all-consuming, power-hungry virus that will take hold of those who sit around idle. And through this desire, they feverishly worked and managed to create a hydrogen bomb. With this hydrogen bomb, they destroyed their own planet. Every inhabitant in the blink of an eye was destroyed. We now see it as the asteroid belt that is between Mars and Jupiter. That is where their planet that they. The Lemurian, or otherwise known as the Mu age, was from the time period of 4,500,000 BC to 12,000 BC. Most of that time they had restored themselves back and were living in a golden age. They lived in the 5th dimensional frequency, which again was able to switch back and forth from 5th into the 3rd density, just toggling back and forth to the ether realm into physical. And whatever the intention or desire of the heart energies, it all could be done. They thrived like this for millions of years in this state. It was a paradise. It was one of just pure magic. They spoke through telepathic ways, so they spoke through thought. So the Lemurian people had reestablished themselves back to their former glory, reactivating everything they had lost in the incident where they lost their planet. Now there was 13 different colonies, and they were all on the one continent called Lemuria. Now the Lemurian people that fractaled off to form Atlantis is just an offshoot branch of the same group. As soon as they separated, the Atlantean group did start to develop technology and had different interests than Lemurian people did before. The Lemurians stood at a minimum of 12 foot to 14 foot tall. When they broke apart into Atlantis and Lemuria, their stature began to shrink. Atlantis and Lemuria were the first-rate citizens. They were the highest evolved on the planet. There was other civilizations there also that they were making their way through the evolution at their pace, at their scale. They had occupied this place before the Lemurians had even come. The Atlanteans went back to the ways as it was on their old planet. They began to make robotics and have the robotics take care of the menial tasks. They also began to get into spacecraft, space flight, rudimentary spacecrafts, and also controlling the weather. They also started to look into philosophy and dabbling in the sciences. They made some weapons too. After all, they were not the only ones occupying this realm of existence. They were the most evolved, and with that being said, they wanted to make sure that they could protect themselves. The Lemurians, however, felt that they would have to keep up with what the Atlanteans were doing. Therefore, were also creating things of technologically advanced weaponry themselves. Then came the conflict on the other beings who were evolving at their own pace. The Atlanteans wanted to control and compartmentalize and then guide them through it in a structured fashion. Wanted to put it into a submission type situation, where the Lemurians wanted to just let them be and evolve naturally. Let them come at their own pace and at their own understanding. This created the conflict. The differences in ideals changed the dynamics between the two now separated factions of the Lemurian beings, and war broke out. The Lemurian beings lived approximately 20,000 years. So they started to get prophetic warnings of calamity about to befall. And this is during the controversy with Atlantis. So they were understanding that this calamity was about to befall. Also, their stature now was between 7 and 8 foot tall. So they had lost several foot in stature in their build, and they knew that calamity was coming. They then approached the council and asked permission to dig tunnels under Mount Shasta in order to preserve the teachings for future generations. When the time was right for the restoration, that these teachings would then rise up within each individual being and be preserved in Mount Shasta in these tunnels. The tunnels were actually capable of holding up to 200,000 Lemurian beings. But what happened was the calamity hit early, and Lemuria, the continent of Lemuria, sank in one day. One day it was above water and everything was fine, clear skies. The next day it was completely submerged. 25,000 Lemurians made it to the catacombs made in Mount Shasta, where all of the knowledge and everything had already been moved to. Atlantis, however, stood a bit longer, but eventually they too sunk to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The atomic weapons that were exchanged back and forth between Lemuria and the continent of Atlantis had scorched the skies, and those other beings that were going through their own evolution went through much suffering and turmoil from earthquakes, bad weather, failed crops, and scorched skies, all due to the war between the Atlantics and the Lemurians. Both of those continents ended up sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Both of those civilizations almost become extinct. If it had not been for the ones who had went into Mount Shasta with the Gnosis, with 25,000 of them, we wouldn't have today the golden age that we're about to come into. It is pretty catastrophic to try to have an evolution of a natural way when you're living in trauma and hardship. Peace, love, and unity is always the best way to go about moving forward and progressing. Admiral Byrd actually came across some artifacts when he was on one of his trips down to Antarctica. And on his trip to Antarctica, he swore that he had found remnants of the lost continent of Atlantis. when in truth he was in the Pacific Ocean and therefore had found remnants from Lemuria. So, are you Lemurian? Are you feeling that there is a God and that you are understanding the divinity within you? Are you toggling back and forth from third density physical into fifth density ether? Are you becoming telepathic? Are you becoming empathic? What's your roots? Is this history or is this mythology? You decide. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. Links are down in the description box. Have yourself a wonderful day.